Everyone keeps asking, is the housing market about to crash? But that is the wrong question. The real risk is how we're trying to prevent it. Today on The Housing Nerd, I'm joined by Jim Bianco, one of the most respected macro analysts in the US, who's been studying housing cycles, policy mistakes, and financial leverage for decades. He explains why stretching mortgages, forcing lower rates, and propping up demand doesn't fix housing. It quietly sets up something much worse. Hey, Jim, how are you doing? Thank you for coming on to the Ohio Housing Nerd.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, big picture, what stands out to you the most right now in the housing market? Where do you see housing headed for the next year or so?
Oh, I think big picture is the tension that you have in the housing market. I've often joked that as long as the sun comes up, housing is in a crisis because there's two large conflicting groups within housing: those that own homes and those that rent or don't own homes. Renters want lower prices so they can buy in, and homeowners want higher prices. So as long as the price of a house moves, if it goes up, we scream there's an affordability crisis. And if it goes down, we scream there's a financial crisis. So that's why I said everybody's perpetually unhappy about the housing market. But that said, we have had since 2012, when we bottomed out after the financial crisis in housing, I'm thinking like the Case-Shiller National Housing Indexes and stuff. We've had a 13-year run that has put us back at affordability levels that are as extreme as they were in 2006, which is as extreme as they've ever been. And that's why I think that the tension that you see in the housing market is greater than it's ever been, because, you know, what is the state of the housing market is it depends on, if you ask, there's 46 million rental units in the United States, and there's about 130 million people that live in those rental units. They think home prices are too high and your house has to come down in price. And if you look at the 86 million homeowners, which is about 200-ish million or something like that, people that live in owner-occupied homes, they agree with Donald Trump, who said on Thursday, don't worry, your house isn't going to go down. We're going to push up the price. We're going to do everything we can to push up the price. And that's the fundamental conflict that you see in the housing market right now.
Yeah. So when you think about the unaffordability part, and how they have different indexes that point to, hey, homes are never been more unaffordable for the average person. Do you think that that alone is cause for concern about home prices and their trend in the future?
I think it is. I mean, the numbers that you can look at, there's a lot of affordability indexes. The one that I like is put out by the Atlanta Fed, and that is to buy the median home, how much of the median income does it take? So you take your average home, you take your average salary, and it's around 44 to 46%. So roughly half of your income is what it would take to buy the average home right now. And that's right on par with 2006. And that is the concern. Does that mean because home prices are that high relative to the median income that they have to crash or go down? No, it doesn't. I mean, they could continue to go up for several more years. What I think it means is whenever home prices roll over, the downside will be a lot more than you think it's going to be, because the market is vulnerable. It just needs a catalyst for it to fall in price. And then because these homes are so unaffordable, that they would go down a lot more than you think. So no, it doesn't mean that they have to go down now. It's just that whenever they do go down, you could probably see them fall a little bit more than you would expect.
Yeah. And there's another case out there that says that, hey, prices will probably just grind sideways, maybe slightly up, maybe slightly down for years to come. And it's just a function of income catching up to where home prices are as far as affordability. So that's like one thing I'm hearing a lot of, that narrative. The other thing is the people that are buying homes have a much higher income. So like the median income for a home buyer, according to National Association of Realtors, is like $110,000 as opposed to like 80 some thousand. So I'm just curious on your take of those, I guess, narratives or those ways of looking at the market.
Well, yeah, that's the optimistic narrative, the first one, right? That these relatively high national home prices, the way we'll fix this without there being pain, is what we've seen happen in the last year or so, where the rate of change of homes is unchanged. By the way, but let me back up and say, within home prices, like a lot of other things, because I'm more of a financial markets kind of guy, but home prices fall into this too. There's always these two narratives about, is it the level of home prices or is it the rate of change? Because the level of home prices, the median home in the United States as of December was about $417,000. And that is a new record, or close to a new record. But the rate of change, how much is it appreciated over the last year? It's pretty close to zero. So it shot up to a new record, and then it's kind of holding up here. And so you could argue home prices are struggling because they're not making new highs. Or you could say, no, they're holding on to those all-time records. And the optimistic scenario is they continue to kind of meander sideways at these record prices. Incomes continue to rise. And then that percentage of income you need to buy the median home falls. And that puts everything back into line. So that is one scenario. And that has happened in the past, that you could see with home prices, as far as moving forward from here. You had a second half of it, and it slipped my mind what it was. What were you asking about in the second half?
Yeah, the fact that the median income for home buyers is much higher than the median income for people. So because and just to put some context around this, like, I help people buy and sell homes all day long, and there are all types of income brackets. And one of the things I'm seeing is that there are, unbelievably, but there are younger home buyers that just make what I would consider, when I was young, a lot of money. They're just making a lot of money, and they're not making $80,000 a year. They're making much more than that, and they're comfortably buying a $600,000 house.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're seeing a lot of that, and that is, part of the the dilemma with, like, the National Association of Realtors numbers, where they're saying that the median age of the first-time home buyer is like 40 right now. And they also say that the median income of the first-time home buyer, they say, is about $103,000. But the median income of somebody around 40 years old in this country is around $65,000. So you go, how's this work? That we somehow have a bunch of 40-year-olds walking around making $100,000 a year that can buy all these homes. But what about all those 40-year-olds that make $65,000 a year? Well, I guess they continue to be renters, is where they're at. And so a lot of these numbers are very stretched as far as home prices go. But let me throw a bigger picture thing on what I've been talking about. Is it really depends on what a home is supposed to be. And it changed in the late 90s. Now, Robert Schiller over at Yale University and Bob Case put together a national home price index called the Case-Shiller Index. And there's data on that they've reverse engineered back to 1890. So, we've got 140 years of data. And and they do it both on a nominal basis, how much homes are worth, and on a real basis. Real means they subtract out the inflation rate. And for the 50 years after World War II, from 1946 to 1996, the real home price in the United States trended sideways. In other words, how much did your home price appreciate by? It appreciated by the inflation rate, maybe a smidge more. So you bought a home, it held its value, and you got a little bit more. And when you sold it, you got the same amount of wealth out of it that you put into it. You didn't make any more, you didn't make any less. You weren't able to retire off of it, but you also didn't fall behind like you would if you were a renter. The late 90s, 1997 Tax Act, we changed the tax code. And one of the things we changed the tax code on was you could roll over $250,000 per person or $500,000 in capital gains without having to pay for it. Because prior to 1990, if you sold your home and it went up in price, even if it was inflation driven, you had a capital gain unless you bought a more expensive home. But now you can exempt a lot of it. And what we saw immediately happen to home prices after that was the late night television shows. I'm dating myself. If you go back to cable TV in the late 90s, early 2000s, how to buy and flip homes, and all of that stuff that we saw before 2006. Because if you buy and you flip homes, it was very tax advantageous. So what happened was that 50-year chart that said home prices went up, by the rate of inflation, home prices started to boom and bust. They boomed into 2006. They busted down 40% down into 2012. I'm talking about the national averages here. And they've been booming up ever since. So I've jokingly called homes becoming, Bitcoin for boomers, because it seems to just rocket around all over the place because of the tax increase. And this gets to this affordability question. And it really is, what is a home? Is it supposed to be, affordable shelter? If I make the median income, I can buy the average house in the United States in the average neighborhood in the United States, which is supposed to be a good neighborhood. And I could live there comfortably. And, as I make more income and my house goes up by the inflation rate, I could trade into a more expensive neighborhood later on. Well, that was 46 to 96. From 97 forward, it's I buy a home, it goes up a lot in price, I sell it, and I can retire to Scottsdale. That's what people start to think about homes right now. And that's the tension that you see right now in the home market, right? Homeowners want their homes to go up. Trump acknowledged it. Renters want in, but they don't want in at the low undesirable end. They want in at the middle if they make the median income. And they can't. And that's where the tension really comes in with, the basic question is it affordable shelter? If it is, it's too high in price. Or is it your path to retirement because your home price is going to keep going up? And depending on if you ask a renter or a homeowner, you're going to get very different answers.
Wow. Yeah. Great. Yeah, that was perfect. I like that, Bitcoin for boomers. Haven't heard that before.
I invented it. I don't know if I should copyright it.
You should, because I'm going to steal it. So that I'm just kidding. The 1997 tax code, I was completely unaware of that. Did not know that at all. And yeah, that I've heard other people ask about this shelter versus investment. So when I look at it now, I'm going to be transparent, honest. I treat it as an investment. I do. Maybe that's wrong.
Everybody does.
Yeah. And
so if you're a homeowner, you treat it as an investment. I treat my home as an investment. Everybody does. But there's 130 million people and 46 million rental units. And a lot of them want in. And as my home goes up in price, they are falling behind. They can't keep up. And they have to buy in a lesser neighborhood or a smaller home. And that's where the affordability complaint comes in. And so like I said, that's the tension, and how's the administration trying to deal with this? And I've been very critical of them, right? Bill Pulte, the scion of the Pulte Homes family, who's the FHFA chairman, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which regulates Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They floated ideas like the 50-year mortgage. They floated ideas like a portable mortgage. Some countries have portable mortgages. So when you sell what is a portable mortgage? A lot of people don't know what these are. If you sell your home, you usually pay off your mortgage and then you get a new mortgage for your new home. And a portable mortgage is you just assign it to your new home. So you just transfer that payment to your new home, and then you use the proceeds of that home to pay for the old home to pay for the new home. Some countries do that. They've also thrown out the idea that you can use your 401k for your down payment. They've got Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. There's a program now at the Treasury that they're going to spend $200 billion buying mortgage-backed securities to try and lower mortgage rates. I've been very critical of all of these plans for a simple reason. This is where we're acknowledging that renters can't buy. We're acknowledging that there's an affordability problem. So we're going to use innovative mortgage finance to get a renter into a home. We tried that in 2000 with adjustable rate mortgages and negative amortization mortgages and 125% loan to value mortgages and option A mortgages and alt A mortgages. And it ended badly when we overdid the home market. So if you want to play the innovative mortgage finance, here's a home, Mr. Renter, you can't afford it. So what we're effectively going to do is leverage the hell out of you to get you into this home. And that we tried that. It works for a little while. And then when we go too far and the correction comes, it wipes out whole families and it's just not pretty. And so be very careful if we're going to go down that road again. And that's, well, we're not there. We're just talking about it as proposals. Famously Trump panned, and he was in Davos week before last, and he was asked about 401ks, using your 401k money for your down payment on your home. And he said he was against it. And you'll love the reason why he said you're against it. He said, because you might have to sell your stocks in order to raise money for your down payment. And I don't want you selling your stocks in your 401k. So he was afraid the stock market would go down is where he was. But see, this is all part of this thing. If you're trying to play this innovative mortgage finance thing to try and, juggle all these balls and get everything to go up, it'll work for a while, but it won't work forever. And I don't know when that end point is. And neither does the president or anybody else. And we've tried this once or twice, and we know that when we hit that end point, it's not pretty.
Yeah, that's I put a video out today about this, about his recent comments, how he wants to drive home prices up and doesn't want to make it easy. Basically said that. He said, I don't want to make it easy on people to buy homes because that drives prices down. It's
and by the way, I'm not against that. I own a home. You own a home. I mean, that's been my and your and everybody else's homeowner self-interest, that. But the screaming about affordability is not coming from homeowners. It's coming from people outside the home ownership market that want in. And so how do you satisfy them? That's the real question.
Well, I've heard you talk about, we could talk about solutions. Certainly, I've heard you mention about supply and the fact that the only thing that's really going to fix affordability is more supply. And probably having policymakers stay out of the housing market, let it do what it's going to do. And natural market forces, I doubt that'll ever happen, but it would be nice. So from an overall view of affordability, how do you actually return affordability to the renters?
Right. So I've talked about supply, and what supply means is build more homes. And what is just so we know that after the financial crisis in 2009 through 2024, which is the last data, according to Bloomberg Economics, we have had 18 million new households formed net in the United States. So we have 18 million. I'm sorry, I got the number wrong. It's 21 million households that have formed in the United States since 2009. So we have 21 million more households. Total housing starts during that same period is 18 million. That's the 18 million number. So there's a deficit of 3 million homes. So we have not been making homes fast enough for the household formation that we've seen since 2009. And so this is why we're $414,000 for the average home price or the median home price in the United States, which is an all-time record. What would slow that down, and what we're saying here is your home, my home can't go up in price, is we build more homes. What every homeowner says is, yeah, that's fine, build more homes. Except when I say, yeah, they're going to build one 3 doors down from you that looks like yours, but it's going to be newer and it's going to be more desirable than your home. And so therefore you're going to have to cut your price to compete with it. And you're like, nope, I'm not interested in that. And that's where building codes and zoning laws and land use restrictions are always put in, but they're always at the local level is where they're at. So Trump knows, Bill Pulte knows, everybody knows he can't legislate. The Congress can't legislate that we build more homes. That is a local level building code, zoning law, city, metropolitan, township type of a rule. And the problem there is that no one walks into the township and says, you know what, I don't want them building any more homes in my house, in my neighborhood, because I don't want my home to go down. They go in there with the proper intentions. oh, we have to have rules on the square footage of the homes that we have and whether or not they could be rented. And if you're in some really restrictive areas like Palo Alto, California, and the color you can paint your house. And they do all of that. And all of that has the intended consequence of making your neighborhood exclusive because you put all these restrictions, but it drives up the price of your home. And that because you're in, and if anybody wants into that neighborhood, they have to pay more to get into that neighborhood. And so, yeah, if you were to reduce those regulations, a lot of Irish guys with pickup trucks would show up with 2x4s and start building new homes immediately in those neighborhoods. And then your home would stagnate in price. So there's more of the tension that you have. So yeah, we need to find 3 million more homes in order to bring this housing market into balance because of what's been happening, because we really ravished the home building market after 2009, and they were very slow in catching up. And that's the deficit that I think keeps the median home price so high.
Yeah, and it's the other thing I'm starting to see and kind of play around with data is the age of our homes in the U.S. They're extremely old. More so in like an area like Ohio or maybe Illinois versus Florida or Arizona. But like in Ohio, it's less than 2% of all homes were built after 2020. So like there's nothing that's new. There's a lot of stock that's built before 1950. And right. There's an obsolescence to that, right? There are homes that are bulldozed. I've looked it up. It's like 360,000 homes a year are bulldozed. So I guess, I'm just curious, what do you have any ideas as to how they could actually improve the supply of homes unless they're just building subdivisions, I guess?
Well, I guess I'll start off by saying if you mention that statistic to anybody in the real estate market in Europe, they would laugh at you. They said, "You want to see an old home? I got homes here in Europe that were built before your country was founded, and people still live in them this day, and they still have broadband and hot water and and electricity in those homes." So I guess an old home is relative in price to where you are, but you're right. The biggest problem with those older homes that are 50 or 60 years old is over the last several years, the average square foot of a home built is doubled, right? So what does it mean that it's an old home? Is it usually doesn't mean that it's you can't renovate it and with spending a little bit of money renovating and bringing it up to modern standards. It's that it's usually smaller, and our tastes have changed. We like homes with great rooms and more open architecture, and older homes had lots of little rooms. And so it's a taste preference as well too. And bear in mind too, because the Northeast and the Midwest are a little bit more house locked because these are developed neighborhoods and stuff. The Northeast and the Midwest have about 60% of the population lives there. The South and the West have about 40% of the population that lives there. But over 80% of all new home construction is in the South and West. It's not in the Northeast or the Midwest. So, actually you could argue that on a dollar by dollar basis, the Phoenix real estate market is larger than the Manhattan real estate market. They're building more homes in Phoenix. They're trading more homes in Phoenix. Manhattan never turns over. It's expensive. It's old. It's legacy. So it just kind of sits there and it doesn't do a whole lot like the Phoenix market would. So where are all the home builders in this country? They're in Orlando, and they're in Nashville, and they're in Austin, and they're in Phoenix, and they're in San Diego. They're not in Cleveland. They're not in Chicago. They're not in New York. They're not in Boston. So you don't get as much building going on in those areas. Add to what I said earlier, Chicago, Cleveland, Boston, New York, they're going to have a lot of building code zoning laws, building land use rules, make it harder for you to say, that's an old house was built after World War II. Let's knock it down and put up a new one. That's hard. In Phoenix, in Austin, it's empty land. And, and the zonings and the building rules are very advantageous to just come on, bring in the bulldozers and let's go. And that's why you see a lot more construction there. So it is an issue. That's a local level issue. And again, it comes back to let's make it more advantageous for these developers to come in and fix that old housing stock in the Northeast and the Midwest. And then, but you'll get a lot of homeowners who say, well, hold on a minute. I don't want newer homes competing with my home. If you like my neighborhood, you have to buy my home to get into my neighborhood. I don't want more supply in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I am seeing that as in Ohio, it's, there are a lot of cornfields, obviously, but when it comes down to where people want to live, there's not a lot of space, unless you're spreading out of the metro area into
Right.
massive subdivisions.
If you want to live in an exurb, I'm in downtown Chicago. If there's a lot of exurb areas that are 30 or 40 or 50 miles outside of the city that, there are some construction going on in new homes, new home construction going on. But if you're talking about in the city, or if you're talking about the immediate ring of suburbs around Chicago or Cleveland or Boston, take your pick, that are like within less than 10 miles from the city center, those are mature neighborhoods. Every lot has a house on it. If you wanted to upgrade a home, if you wanted to build a new home in those neighborhoods, you have to knock down an older home in order to build a newer one. And that's where it's not the process of knocking down a home that makes it more expensive. I've talked to enough builders, it's $15,000, knock down an old home and away we go, especially if you're building a $400,000 or $500,000 house on that plot or even more. It's the rules, the regulations, the zoning laws, and everything else that drives up the cost of doing that. And that's why we've been fixing that problem by moving further and further out of these city centers. But now we're so far out of them that if you want to go way out, and if you're familiar with the Chicago area, I'm thinking like Elgin, Illinois, or west of Elgin, Illinois. Now you're like 45, 50 miles outside of Chicago. You might as well not even consider Chicago to be an option. At that point, you're an hour to the airport, let alone, and another hour to get downtown at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I've just reviewed the Chicago market recently. I couldn't believe the prices. Well, first off, the inventory there is decimated from when you compare it to pre-COVID levels, has not recovered really at all of the inventory of homes for sale. And the prices have just, in a lot of zip codes anyway, it looks like prices have continued to go up. And it looks, and you can really see, Jim, to your point, the neighborhoods where more new homes are coming in, the suburbs like Austin and Orlando and Phoenix, that's where we're seeing the price declines. But in the Northeast and the Midwest, it's just like you said, and I did not know that stat about the new construction versus the Midwest and Northeast. So the reason I really want to focus on this inventory thing of old homes, new homes, and all that is because of this silver tsunami discussion. And I hear a lot of housing bears say, look, all you got to do is wait. Don't buy now. Wait, because as the boomers pass away, you are going to inherit a nirvana of real estate that you can buy for pennies on the dollar. There will be so many homes available that you won't know what to do with them all. I look at it and think, well, the younger generation is going to have to be okay with a renovation project, or they're going to have to buy a new home. And if we're not building enough new homes, they're going to be forced into a renovation project. I don't know that they even want that project. So what are your views there on that silver tsunami, and maybe how that maybe even plays into immigration and population decline?
I've heard this argument for 20 years that, all the boomers are going to die, and we're going to then have a big change in the economy once they pass on. I guess technically it's true. I hopefully won't disappoint anybody by saying we're all going to die one day. That is, but what we're finding is that day is being pushed off for a lot further than we thought. I mean, we are now a country that elects 80-year-olds to be president. So I don't know when that date is going to be that we're going to see. It still might be 10 or 15 or 20 years away. Also, this is just my preference. I mean, there are neighborhoods, at least I have seen, where there are like a lot of older people, and there's not many young families, and the school options are very limited. I don't hear a lot of 35 or 40-year-olds going, yeah, I hope some of the boomers croak and I can get a cheap house in that neighborhood. They don't want to live in those neighborhoods. They want to live in more neighborhoods like that fit their demographic as well, too. So it's a different demographic neighborhood that you're seeing as well. But the point is taken is that there is going to be a generational pass. Look, they talk about this in the stock market too, right? Because what's going to happen when all these boomers, assume room temperature and they got to pass their stock portfolios down to their heirs as well too. And then there's going to be an estate tax that's going to be stuck on those as well. So this question is large, a lot larger than just real estate.
Yeah. And I wonder if, I wonder if younger buyers even want an old home. I mean, I try to help people buy a home all the time, and I'm like, hey, there's a home over here. It was built in 1920. It needs a complete renovation, but man, if you can snag it at this price, you could have a great asset down the road. And they're like, I don't want that house. I want something that's 3,000 square feet, has 3 bathrooms and 5 bedrooms or something.
And, and it has a great room. And, we weren't building those kind of homes in 1920. And like I said, that's the difference between Europe and here, is because in Europe, they'll say, look, I work with a guy that lives outside of London, and his house is technically as old as our country. Now, it was last renovated about 10 years ago, but the same footprint, the same size, they're okay with that, right? But we have evolved. We have doubled. If you go from 1950 to today, the size of the average home is doubled in size. As a matter of fact, if you've ever go on YouTube and you've ever seen old footage of homes when we were having the big building boom of the 50s, they were talking about, here's like an 1,800, 2,000 square foot home. And it would be like a family of 5, mother and father and 3 kids. I was like, 1,800 square feet. That's what like my single kids live in now, and you raised like 3 kids in a house that size and you'd stuff 3 kids into the same bedroom, different era. And so we're not thinking that way. So that's the biggest issue we have with older homes. It's not that they're old. It's just that their footprints and their styles, like I said, lots of little rooms as opposed to larger open rooms is not what we want.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, and maybe at the end of the day, the future generations, like my kid who's 13 now, will grow up thinking, no, I want an older home that I can renovate, and that'll be something that they do. Who knows? Or maybe because we're not having as many kids, I've often thought, well, maybe we will want smaller homes. They'll be cheaper to heat. The taxes will be less. Insurance will be less. So maybe it does make sense. But the buyer habits I'm seeing right now, they want bigger and better, right? They want 4,500 square feet for 2 people. So, I don't know how long that's going to continue. But changing paths just a little bit, not a ton though, when you talk about availability of houses. I've heard you talk about AI a lot and data centers. And I've really examined this in Ohio because we're ranked 5th in the nation for the number of data centers. We've got 191 in the state, and in Central Ohio, we've got 113 in Columbus alone. And I think there's like nearly 4,000 in the U.S. data centers. Where do you see, and it ties to the housing market, because the people in Ohio are like, I don't want to live near a data center. I mean, the number one question I get from buyers when they're looking to move here is, I don't want to be near a data center. I don't want that. So how do you see that playing out over time?
What are they afraid of? What are they afraid of about being near a data center? In other words, let me refine the question. A data center is usually zoned in an industrial or commercial spot in town. Yeah. So why is a data center any different than them saying, I just don't want to be near the commercial zoning? Why is that a specific type of commercial zoning that they're, but if I told you it was an Amazon fulfillment center, you'd be okay with it. But if it's a data center, you're not okay with it? Or how would you answer that?
Yeah, I think it comes down, it's a great question. I think it comes down to the fact that maybe it's just fear they have because of what they've heard, right? But they also, they don't want, and maybe fear of the unknown because they don't really understand it. And they think it's, they hear AI and they think big bad Skynet. And so maybe that's the reason, Jim. They also don't like, in Ohio, property taxes are a big issue. They don't like the abatements they get. They think that's evil. And they think it hurts home values, which I don't know if it does or not. But People are asking me, do you think this data center thing is going to stop? I'm like, I don't think so. I think you're going to see more of them.
I think you're going to see more of them too. And a couple of things about AI. I want to be clear on what I'm saying here. I'm very, very optimistic about AI. Now, I didn't say is an investment. What I mean by optimistic about AI, we need AI. We should want AI. What do I mean by that? In modern life in 2026, everything we do is on some kind of device where, whether it's you're ordering your favorite drink from Starbucks, to doing your job, to communicating like we're communicating here, it's all done on computers. And I've argued, I'm stolen this from other people, so it's not original to me, that a lot of jobs in 2026 have become soulless database operator jobs. That's all because everything is about the database. And I've always used the example, think about the airport. You go to the airport and everybody who works there is a database operator. You go to security, they scan you in. You have to be in the database properly. You get to go through security. Otherwise, you got to go fix the database by going to the counter. Then you go to the club, they scan you in. And if you aren't in the database, they got to fix you in the database. And then you get to go in the club. Then you got to go on the plane. Your ticket better, your boarding pass better be in the database properly. That's every job. That is tiresome. That is tedious. That is expensive. What you should want is I walk into the airport and facial recognition. It's there already. It's there already. Don't think that this is something that doesn't exist. Says, oh, there's Jim. Okay, he's on this flight to Columbus. Let him through. You go through security and you walk on the plane. Or there's Jim. I don't know why he's here. He's going to be at security in 8 seconds. We better fix it before he gets there. And don't ask him 85 questions about why he's at the airport. That's why we need it. If I want to order my favorite drink from Starbucks, I want to push the little microphone on my phone and say, order my favorite drink from the nearest Starbucks. Done. I don't want to have to push buttons. If I want to know what the stock market did yesterday, tell me what the stock market did. That's why we need AI. That's why we need it. And I think we're going to get more of it in the future. And it's going to be something that is going to help us. I think I'm very positive on it. Now, as far as the data centers go, that's powering AI, the risk with the data centers is, I use the Pan Am example. In the 1950s, there's this famous picture, you could probably Google it if you're interested in seeing it, of a 5 megabyte hard drive. To keep this in mind, your phone has 1 million times the memory of a 5 megabyte hard drive. This thing looked like it was the size of 2 freezers, weighed 3,000 pounds, and it was on a forklift truck being put on a Pan Am plane to be flown across the country. Now, that is a million times that is what you have in your pocket. The thing about data centers is, yeah, we're going to keep building them because we need them to power this AI thing. But the risk is that all of a sudden your data center, your major 400,000 foot data center is this in the future, and we're not there yet. The technology is not there. Maybe that technology comes, and then those data centers wind up becoming, empty warehouses in the future. So that's the risk. But as far as AI goes, I think we should want AI. We should need AI. You spend all day long being frustrated either on a spreadsheet or trying to send an email or trying to order your favorite drink or trying to look up the score or trying to figure out what channel that the game is on, because every channel is on a different streaming service. You should be able to just push a button and say, you computer, figure it out. I want to watch the game. Put it on the TV. Don't ask me any more questions than that. And that's what AI will be able to deliver for us. Instead of us spending all day doing all this tedious stuff that we do with computers. So there's my pitch on AI. You buying it?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand. I agree. It's, like you said, we're on AI right now, right? Not AI, but we're in a data center right now, right? Because it's when viewers see this on YouTube, it's going through a Google data center, somewhat, right? And yeah, it's completely changed. AI has completely changed how I do business as a realtor, as an investor. It's completely changed the day that I could drive down the road and the day that I could leave a job walk on a new investment opportunity and just have the conversation with ChatGPT, asking it if it's a good deal or not, as I'm driving down the road, and then it analyzes the deal, and then it remembers that, okay, yesterday you saw this other property, Jason, and remember there was something there you should, watch out for. It's like, wow, that's definitely a game changer. Do
Yep.
you think?
And that's something, by the way, before AI, that's something you could have done anyway, but it would have taken you an hour or two to do it, right? Sitting back in the office on a spreadsheet, keying in all the information and stuff like that. Now AI just does it in 5 seconds for us. So you could then move on to doing other more important, more fulfilling things in your day than spending all your time doing something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you part of the housing market prediction market, I guess, or forecast is obviously employment. What's your position, or how do you look at that, the AI destroying jobs, that prediction, or the AI giving us a panacea of jobs that we're going to be able to take advantage of, that's going to grow income? How do you look at that?
Both. It's both, and it's all about the timing. Technology has been throughout history a net creator of jobs. It will create more jobs than it will destroy. The fear is, what's the speed at which both happen? Do you wreck the jobs first and then you create the new ones later? Or do you kind of have a one-for-one trade-off? The Industrial Revolution, that was a great technological advance. And what it first did was it wound up creating a big disruption in society, and we got a pushback from the Industrial Revolution, and it was called communism. And that, and because of the disruption, but eventually it created more jobs. If we wind up saying that AI is going to be a net taking away jobs, reducing jobs, we'll get a pushback. It won't be communism. Communism was the pushback to the Industrial Revolution, but it will be some other kind of constraint on AI, or some other kind of collective thought to try and keep that down because of the destruction of jobs. But it will be a net creator of jobs. And I'll use as an example this podcast. Let's say we were sitting here and it's 1996 instead of being 2026. And you said, boy, I would like to do an interview with me. You'd like to do an interview with me for about 45 minutes to an hour about the housing market, and you'd like to make it available to 2 billion people. How could you have done that in 1996? The answer is simple. You would have had to have bought NBC and the BBC for billions of dollars, and then block off an hour of their time, tens of millions of dollars worth of commercials, and run this interview. In 2026, it's the cost of electricity. A couple of pennies for electricity, and then upload it to a Google data center. And anybody on YouTube, which is billions of people, have the opportunity to view it. So that technology was a net creator of jobs. And I'm old enough to remember the late 90s when we worried about all those lost jobs at networks, because this new technology was starting in the early 2000s, and these new technologies were coming, and all those lost jobs at newspapers and everything. But we created far more new jobs and new opportunities because of it. So yeah, it will create new jobs. And how does it create new jobs? Things now that you don't, and I'll use this podcast again. Why did it never occur to anybody to do this 30 years ago? Because the cost was so prohibitively expensive. It never crossed your mind to do something like this. But in 2026 or in the 2020s, the cost has dropped so much that business opportunities have opened, like this podcast. Well, that's what AI will do. There will be millions of jobs, tens of millions of jobs in whole new industries that will exist because they will change the cost structure and make things profitable that currently are not. If you want one example, that would be autonomous driving. Everybody worries about the cost of the jobs because, according to the IRS, I read this about a year ago. When you fill out your tax return, you put your occupation in there. The number one thing that people put in their occupation is driver. Now that's taxi driver, truck driver, forklift driver, bus driver, tow truck driver. But the word driver is in like 6 or 7 million of those. So you would argue, autonomous driving is going to get rid of 6 or 7 million jobs. Yeah, but it's also going to make the cost of transportation go down. It's going to cost you $5 to go to the airport in the future. It's going to cost you a couple of pennies to deliver a physical product to somebody. That is going to open up business opportunities that don't exist now because it's too expensive to do a lot of that stuff. That's where the job creation will come.
Yeah, great examples. Would never guess that about drivers. And
sales, by the way, cashier is the number one, and drivers like in the top 5.
Cashier is number 1.
Yeah.
Wow. I think I would not guess that either. It's a great point though. You bring up about this podcast, for instance. You're right. You could not do this, years ago. And when I was 18, there's no possible way I would think I'd be sitting here with you doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no way. And so I think a lot of people miss the fact that there are a lot of opportunities out there for younger people to earn a living in ways that the dinosaurs aren't thinking of, because we're just not thinking that way. And I feel like there's a group of younger people coming up that know it and are taking advantage of it and making things happen. And I think that we may be underestimating that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'll go you one step further. Is that why do you think that all of the major tech companies and all the newer, exciting technologies are always CEO'd by very young people? I'll give you the example I use. I actually gave a speech in Charlotte, which is the headquarters of Bank of America, and I was picking on Brian Moynihan, who's the chairman of Bank of America. Now, I'll say at the top, I've got enormous respect for him, and I think he's a tremendous chairman. But he said that Bank of America is spending more on AI and technology than any financial services firm in the world. And okay, it's probably true, given the size of the bank and given the amount of money that they're spending on it. And what he implies in that, what you hear people think is, oh God, what that means is they're going to replace thousands of middle managers with one computer, one large language AI data center. And that the margin of the bank is going to go way up, and it's going to then become uber profitable bank. I push back and say, all of that's true, except the job that is going to change the most is Brian Moynihan's job. That the CEO of that bank, he has zero experience in what the business model of that bank will be in 5 or 10 years, zero experience of it in 5 or 10 years because of AI. He's got 40 years of experience in a business model of running that bank that is about to go obsolete. Does he have the ability, being over the age of 60, to adjust to that new business model, or does he fight it like everybody else fights it? And that's why when the new technologies come in, it's a 33-year-old that understands the new technology, is not burdened by the legacy, and that they just go with the flow, and then they wind up running those new companies. I'll give you another bank example. JP Morgan is run by Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon started right before COVID, spent $3 billion building this new JP Morgan tower on 47th Street in Midtown Manhattan. And it got done last year. And he's been commanding, remote work's over. Everybody back to my new shiny tower, get back in the office, 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Jamie, the world's changed. And you're over the age of 60 and had a heart procedure a couple of years ago. And you are probably the best banker of our generation. Absolutely, you are. You're a tremendous, but you're acting your age, man. You're unwilling to want to change with the new world. And you're just saying, I built this tower for a previous business model, and we're going to stick with it because I built this tower. That's why the 33-year-old will come in and say, I don't care about your tower. This is the way that the world works now. And so that's where, I don't worry about the old generation. I mean, I don't worry about the young generation. I hear this. Look, I got college-age kids. I got kids that are a couple of years out of college. And everybody says, man, they're not going to get jobs because of AI. I get it. It's going to be hard for them to break through. It always is. I worry about the 60-plus-year-olds. Are you ready to say, I got 30 years of experience doing this job this way, just memory hole all of it, and be flexible enough to say, it's now going to be something completely different. And we're going to have to learn how to do this in a completely different way, and don't fight it. That is very hard for older people to do.
No doubt, no doubt. So, you have those kids at that age, where they're out there starting their professional life. Do you think that there's this, because there's a story out there that kids coming out of college now are having an extremely difficult time finding a job. Is that true? Do you think that's going to get worse? Do you think it's going to get better?
Sort of. It's sort of true. And what I mean by sort of is, I've actually looked into this. John Birnbaum at Financial Times has written a lot about this as well, too. They break down the employment statistics like a million different ways. And the favorite statistic everybody's using now is 22 to 27 college educated. So why'd they pick that? That's the first 5 years out of school. It's basically because you usually graduate at 21. And so what we're finding is, if you break it down by male, female unemployment, 22 to 27, is the same as it's been the last 5 years, very low, under 4%. Male unemployment, 22 to 27, has been rising, and it's above 7.5%. And for the first time by some measures, 22 to 27, not college educated, has a lower unemployment rate than college educated. Why? Female degrees. Where do females or women get their degrees from? They tend to gravitate towards healthcare, think nursing, or education, think teacher. There's an insatiable demand for those jobs. Men tend to gravitate towards degrees like computer science and finance. Those are on the leading edge of being disrupted by technology right now. We don't need coders. I listened to the All In podcast, and they said about 6 months ago that coding productivity is going up 5% a month. Now, what does that mean in English? That means if I hire one coder in 14 months, they can do the job of 2 coders. And in 28 months, they can do the job of 4 coders. That's why I don't need to hire coders. So all these kids that are getting college computer science degrees going, I know how to do Python, and I know how to do R, and I know how to do all this stuff. I don't need you. We've got AI, and I've got more coders than I know. And these guys are doing the work of 4 people that I used to have do it 2 years ago. Now 1 person does it. And that tends to be more of a male degree. So yes, there is a bit of that. But if you are in the right areas like healthcare or education, there's an insatiable demand for people in those jobs right now. So that's all part of the structure of the economy changing. Now, what I hope that those kids will do is they'll say, okay, well, the traditional coding job is not there. I understand this technology. I understand where this technology is going. Hopefully I could either create this new job for myself or find that new job that didn't actually exist 2 years ago. They'll have to work a little bit harder at it, no doubt about it. But like I said, this transition to this AI era, look, I actually think this is going to be bigger than the internet transition. This transition to the AI era is going to have its bumps and its bruises. But like I said before, I'm more worried about the older crowd fighting it, because the younger crowd's a little bit more malleable and will go with the flow as to what they need to do.
Yeah, I think as younger people come up, they're just going to know that, oh, this is what I should be in. Like when I was growing up, people were like, you got to go to computer science. Nobody gets computer science.
There was on social media this past weekend before we talked, I'll bottom line it for everybody. There was, because of all of this new AI, there's a lawyer who works in a large law firm who also had a computer science degree, who said that he has used through AI, he has 100% automated his job. He is still collecting a paycheck. His boss still thinks he does his job. He doesn't do anything. The computer is doing everything for him. So when his boss says, hey, review this contract, or I need this written up, or an opinion on that, AI is just churning it all out for him, and he's just collecting his paycheck. Now he's staying anonymous. Now there's been some pushback about whether that's a tall tale on the internet or that's actually happening. But a lot of people that understand this say it currently is technically possible. That, so jobs are changing away. And I would argue that guy is probably the most valuable guy in his law firm because he understands how to do that, where most of the lawyers don't. And that is, you don't want to fire him because of that. You want to promote him because you want to learn what he understands and how to incorporate that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's a crazy story. And I'm sure there's a lot of cases out there like it where people are, there's a lot of like faceless YouTube channels and there's these YouTube channels where I'll watch them and it sounds like it's, like somebody narrating it. But after you listen to it for a little while, you're like, I don't think this is like, I think somebody is, this is AI, and they've got 10 or hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And I'm thinking, man,
there's
what am I
actually
doing wrong?
There's actually a debate with Spotify right now because YouTube will not allow AI generated music. Spotify does. And there are some AI generated bands, if you will, that are getting followers and listens and generating revenue off of AI. And there's a lot of complaining about AI because really where we are with AI is the following. What is an AI generated music, right? It is, what is the computer doing when it generates music? It's taking the sum of what we know and it's just rejumbling it into something different. So it's not creating anything new. It's just picking parts of previously done stuff and just reassembling it a little bit differently. The problem with that is that that pre-done stuff is all copyrighted material. So the argument is that a lot of AI cannot, if it's AI generated, by definition, it's a violation of copyright laws because you're stealing. In fact, I've watched, there's a guy named Rick Beato who does a YouTube on music, and he talks about this. And he plays some of this AI music, and we're talking about rock music now, and he says you can hear various influences of other rock bands you might be familiar with in this AI rock music. And he says they're not getting revenues or royalties off of this, but obviously the AI is using them, but and so that is like a big debate with AI. That's why it's such a big issue. Hoping what I'm leave you with is that this is a really complicated issue and it's not going to go away anytime soon. And it is something that we're going to have to learn to adjust to, and we just can't push back on it.
Yeah. Well, I could go on and on about AI, no doubt. It's and what you have to say is fascinating. I did not know. I may have known this Rick, or I may have watched this Rick guy's channel.
Beato, Beato.
Yeah.
He's got like 5 million followers. He mainly talks about music, but he does some stuff about AI as well too. He interviews artists and stuff like that. So he's an interesting guy as well.
Is he an older guy?
Yes. Yeah,
okay, I think I've watched him because one time he did a special about he talked about AI and the creation of that of music, and it was very interesting. So I'll just say this real fast about music. I do love one of the things he does say is he says that creativity wise, in his opinion, music is in the doldrums about as bad as it's ever been in the last 60 or 70 years. And his argument is the last time it was this bad, that there was just nothing that anybody was interested in being produced. Look at the Grammys. Nobody knows who any of those songs are that won. We got the Beatles right after that. So his argument is maybe we're on the verge of like the newer genre Beatles type kind of experience. Somebody's going to invent something wholly new, wholly different that everybody gets excited with. But his argument is, if you're going to say, the Grammys were the weekend before we were recording and I don't recognize a single song from a single person and nobody cares about that stuff. You're right. Everybody's like that. But we were also like that once 60 years ago, and then the world changed, and maybe hopefully the world is about to change. Yeah, that's amazing because I do believe I caught an episode of his where he reviewed how many top songs were made by groups rather than individuals, and
yes,
like the number of top hits that were created by groups is gone. It's all individuals.
Because it's too hard. I've seen that episode too. We delved into music. It's because managing a group is too hard, and nobody wants to manage them, and they fight, and they always argue about royalties and creative control. It's much easier to manage a single artist, and
maybe it's also because of technology, right? Somebody can kind of pull together music a lot quicker. Anyway, this isn't a music channel, but interesting stuff. So no, it's great. It's great. It sounds like we like the same type of music. So as we end this thing, one thing I did want to ask you about is interest rates. So I when I put my realtor brain on, I go, all right, you've got the Fed changing hands with Kevin Warsh. You've got presumably you've got maybe the short end coming down as the Fed pushes rates down, but the long end has continued higher for longer. Number one, do you see that changing? Number two, what's the chance that this bank deregulation spurs banks to purchase enough of treasuries that it will drive long rates down? Does that make sense, my question?
Yeah, no, your question does make sense. And to answer the second part of the question, I don't think that the treasury purchases or the purchases of securities is going to drive rates down. I think it's going to be more of the fundamentals. So let me back up a second. Trump likes to talk a lot about interest rates. And I've been critical that we always like to joke, we being everybody, like to joke that how do you describe the stock market? Oh, that's simple. Up is good and down is bad. We always want stock prices to go up, and when they go down, it's bad. Well, Trump has done a very good job of getting everybody to think about interest rates in the reverse. Down is always good and up is always bad. And I've said that's actually not true. Interest rates are a lot more nuanced than that. That interest rates should be at about approximately a fair value. If they are too high, they are restrictive and they choke off economic growth because money is too expensive to expand, to do things, to take out a mortgage. If they are too low, that's equally a problem too, because then money is too cheap and it creates people that will then finance bad ideas, or what the Austrian economists call malinvestment, and create distortions in your economy. You don't want them too low either. You want them roughly at their fair value, the optimal rate, and you will get the optimal growth. Now, I've been arguing that roughly fair value, I'll use the 10-year treasury, is somewhere between 5 and 5.5%. It's at 4.25%. So we're a little bit low on that rate now. I understand that people say that, that might mean that mortgage rates would actually have to continue to stay at these levels or go higher. Well, that gets back to our earlier conversation about affordability. If you want to say to renters, the way I'm going to get you into these homes you can't afford is through innovative mortgage finance by forcing interest rates down, in the short term, your house, my house will all go up in price. In the long term, you're going to create a distortion. And we saw what happened in 2006 to 2009 when we had that last type of distortion. So I think that you want to have interest rates approximate their fair value. They're a little bit low right now. Kevin Warsh is coming in. He's a good pick by Trump. He was a Federal Reserve governor from 2006 to 2011. So he's got some experience with the bank. He's got some innovative ideas about how he thinks the Federal Reserve should run. He also has been arguing, this is the unknown about Kevin Warsh. He's been arguing that interest rates should be cut by the central bank to push them lower, that hopefully would bring down yields. But his history, when he was at the Fed and what he wrote in the years after he left the Fed, was very hawkish, about that interest rates needed to stay up. So there's this inconsistency between what he's saying now and his legacy of what he's been writing over the last many years. That'll get fleshed out over time. Like when he has his confirmation hearings, hopefully they won't ask him idiot questions, but they'll ask him about this and to explain that in 2015 you said this, in 2019 you said this, and now you're saying this. how do you square the differences between all of those different type of targets? But I would argue that interest rates need to approximate their average rate. Now, why is it that it's 5% and not 2 like it was before 2019? The inflation rate. The inflation rate right now, as of the end of January, Wall Street does a fairly good job of estimating it. It's around 3%. If it's around 3%, the Fed believes that the optimal Fed rate, the Fed funds rate, should be 3% plus 1, 4. And if the optimal funds rate is around 4, we're at 3.5 now, we're a little bit below that. The optimal 10-year rate's 5. So we're a little bit low on these numbers. If the Fed wants to cut one more time, all right, fine. One more time's not going to change a lot. But if the Fed wants to, if Warsh wants to do what Trump has been saying, we need to cut the funds rate to 1%. I actually think that will do more damage in the long run than good, because it will spur that malinvestment idea. Cheap money everywhere. Just borrow money and do stupid things with it. And stupid things create distortions in economies, and we wind up paying for that in the long run. Short term, it'd be good, but in the long run, it would be very bad.
Understood. Yeah, I agree. I think most realtors want, and people in my industry want rates lower. I don't, even as an investor, because if rates were a lot lower, I would refinance a lot of properties. But I'm like, for the health of the economy, for the health of the new home buyer, it's probably better long term to have rates higher for longer.
Keep in mind too that if rates go down, if rates go down, yeah, there's a party. Everybody refinances, and renters can get in because they can get lower monthly payments and everything. And then if it creates inflation or distortion, rates shoot up, and then it's like your real estate market hits a brick wall. And then you pay for it on that end of the equation. But in the short term, it's good. But if we're all not here to basically, have a big money grab for 3 to 5 years and get out, I don't think we should want that.
Yeah, understood. Well, this has been great, Jim. I mean, we're at we've gone over our time limit, but this was very educational. I think the viewers, the housing nerds, are going to get a lot out of it. And anything else that you want to say about housing at all, or any way you want to end it?
You're pro housing, but no, I just think that, I'll end it where I began. And that is that fundamental conflict between what a renter wants, and there's 130 million people in renters, and what a homeowner wants. There are about 200 million people that own homes. They don't want the same thing. Renters want lower prices and homeowners want higher prices. And that's hard to put it together to both at the same time, which is why there always is that tension, which is why I joked that if the sun comes up tomorrow, somebody's unhappy with housing. It depends on whether prices are going up or prices are going down. And I think if you understand that concept, it makes a little bit more sense when we scream about affordability. Who is it that is screaming about affordability? It's those that want in, and they want in. Otherwise, they wouldn't care about affordability.
Yeah, great way to describe it. And you break that down very well, very easy to understand. And yeah, there is tension, and I'm sure that's going to continue. I really like the way you break it down and say, hey, half is going to be upset regardless.
Right.
So that's tremendous. All right, Jim, listen, thank you so much. And hopefully you'll be gracious enough to come on again in the future as the market shifts.
I'm here and available. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Awesome, Jim. Thank you so much.